So good day, we're going to continue our discussion, which is exercise number 8 in laboratory, which is the skeletal system. So the skeleton serve as support or framework of the body, a film surface for muscles attachment, for locomotion, protection of soft parts and important organs, site of manufacture of red blood corpuscles, mineral storage. So the skeletal system may contain two parts, the exoskeleton and the endoskeleton. So the skeletal system work as a support structure for your body. So ang skeletal system mo support sa ato ang lawas. It gives the body shape, siya ang gatag og shape, gaalo siya sa atong movement, makes blood cells, provides protection for organs and stores minerals. The skeletal system is also called the musculoskeletal system. Musculoskeletal system. The skeletal system is very important. You know why? The skeleton is an important organ for the support of the body and for attachment of muscles and tendons, as well as body movement. The skeleton protects the organs of the cranial and thoracic cavities from injuries, and it houses and protects the bone marrow within its cavities. Muna siya. Ang skeletal system is very important because siya ang support sa ato ang lawas. Next is, what is exoskeleton? Now, kani siya. The two parts of skeletal system is exoskeleton. So, exoskeleton is a rigid external covering for the body in some invertebrate animals, especially arthropods, providing both support and protection. Muna siya ang exoskeleton. Then, what is endoskeleton? Endoskeleton is an internal skeleton such as the bony or cartilaginous skeleton of vertebrates. Next is skull of the toad dorsal view. So, what do you call by skull? Skull is the part of the axial skeleton which forms the frame of the head and protects the brain is called skull. It consists of various small and large bones. A skull has different parts such as cranium, upper jaw, lower jaw, nasal, capsule eye cavity, air cavity, and hyoid apparatus. So ang skull di ay is usasab siya nga ga-support sa ato ang lawas. Ang skull is naa siya different parts which is upper jaw, lower jaw, and etc. So the brain is called, ang ato pong utok mo ginatawag sab siya og skull. Next is foramen magnum. So foramen magnum is a large opening at the posterior end of the skull for the passage of the spinal cord. So in other term, foramen is a function as a passage of the central nervous system through the skull connecting the brain with the spinal cord. So ang foramen magnum di ay is nag-connect na siya into brain in the spinal cord. On either side, the foramen magnum is an occipital condyle. These condyles form joints with the first cervical vertebra. Next is exoccipital bones. Two flat bones bordering the two sides of the foramen magnum. They bear the occipital condyles, which are ventral and lateral projections to the foramen magnum. These articulate the skull with the atlas. Muna siya ang exoccipital bone. So in other term, exoccipital bone is the most posterior cranial bone and the main bone of the occiput. It is considered a flat bone like all your cranial bones, meaning that its primary function is either for protection or to provide a broad surface for much muscle attachment. So, ang occipital bone is flat bone nga and cranial bone nga nag-function, nga primary function nga nag-protect or nag-provide sa atoang muscle attachment. Next is protic bone. So, protic bone, anterior and a little lateral to the occipital bones, they includes the inner ear. So, in other term, protic bone is an endochondral bone of the brain case. It is typically forms the anterior and dorsal surface of the otic capsule. The otic capsule contains, in addition to the otic region of the brain itself, the labyrinth and inner ear. So sa protic bone is nabilong sab diri ang brain. Nagform ni siya og dorsal surface the otic capsule. Next is squamosal bone. So squamosal bone is hammer-shaped bones lateral to the protic. Their anterior parts, which corresponds to the head of the hammer, are free. The middle portion are attached to the product, and their posterior components, which correspond to the handles of the hammer, are attached to the posterior ends of the lower upper jaw, skull. They are elongated bones and are anterior to the exophylates. So in other term, squamosal bone is a skull bone found in most reptiles, amphibians, and bird. In fishes, it is also called the pterotic bone. So ang squamosal bone is makita nato ni siya sa reptiles, sa amphibians, and especially sa mga langgam. Ang mga langgam is naay squamosal bone. So next is sphenoid of frog. So sphenoid bone is a ring of bones anterior to the front parietals and upper as a diamond-shaped piece. So ang phenotmoid frog is kuan siya diamond-shaped. So in other term, bone of the frog's skull is located in front of the parasphenoid bone. So ang sphenoid is makita nato siya sa parasphenoid bone. It is also formed as three bones in mammals, comprising the lesser wings of the anterior part of the base. Orthosphenoid and presphenoid, though some fusion might occur, but only parasphenoid are completely absent in mammals. Next is premaxillae. So premaxillae is two small teeth bearing bones at the most anterior portion of the upper jaw. So ang premartyres in other term is the nominal definition is indicates the one that precedes or it's ahead of the maxilla and skull. The premaxilla is the intermaxillary segment of the maxilla where four upper incisives are placed. 3. It develops embryonically from the primary plate. So next is quadratujugal. So quadratujugal is small bone without teeth and forming the posterior end of the upper jaw to which the squamosal is attached. So ang quadratujugal is small bone nga wala na siya teeth. So in other definition is it is a prominent strap-like bone in the skull and provides structural integrity in the postorbital region of the skull. Next is lower jaw. Next is parasphenoid. The parasphenoids is the unpaired dagger-shaped bone at the base of the cranium ventral to the frontoparietals. So, in other definition, parasphenoid is a bone in frog situated beneath the sphenoid at the base of the skull. So, makita ning parasphenoid is nasa tunga sa skull. This is flattened, inverted T-shaped bone. So, nagporma ni siya og T. T ang porma sa parasphenoid. So, the correct answer is that the parasphenoid bone in frogs forms floor of the cranium. So, next is palatines. Palatines is cylinder rod-shaped bones extending laterally from the anterior part of the paraspheroid to the upper jaw. So, ang palatines is rod-shaped bones extending laterally. So, in other term, it is bones contribute to the posterior part of the roof of the mouth and floor and lateral walls of the nose, the medial wall of the maxillary sinuses, and the orbital floor. So, mauna siya ang other term sa adult paralitine or paralitine bone. Paralitine bone is part of the mouth and floor. Next is vomers. Vomers is the irregularly shaped bones anterior to the pauline bearing fine teeth like structures the vomerine teeth. So, vomerine teeth or vomers is a small, thin, plow-shaped midline bone that occupies and divides the nasal cavity. It articulates inferiorly on the midline that maxillae and the palatines superiorly with the sphenoid via its wings, and anterosuperiorly with an ethmoid. So, ang vomer is small. Ang vomer is gamay nga thin plow shape midline bone. So, mao na siya ang vomers. Next is vomers, and next is thyroids or triadiate bones. Posterior bones on the sides of the skull ventral to the squamosal wrist. Branches into three, the anterior branches which are attached to the maxilla. So, ang thyroids is a major elevator of the jaw is a square-shaped masticatory muscles located on the medial aspect of the lower jaw bilaterally. So, ang thyroid is makita nato na siya, square shape na siya, makita nato siya, nakalocated na siya sa lower jaw bilaterally. Dito nato makitaan ang thyroid sa frog or sa tao. Next is lower jaw. So, lower jaw is composed of the right and left valves. Each half is divided into three parts. So, in what is lower jaw? So, in other definition, lower jaw is a broad and flat encasing and protecting the brain, and it uses its mandible and the maxillary teeth of its upper jaw to hold onto prey. So, ang lower jaw is usap na siya ang nga-protect sa ato ang utok and maxillary teeth its upper jaw to hold onto prey. So, the three parts of lower jaw is mento-maxillain, dentary, and angulus-splenial. So, mento-maxillain is a small bone which is an ossified part of Meckel's cartilage, naked cartilage. So, in other definition, or the function of mentomycelium is the bone or cartilage forming the anterior extremity of the lower jaw in some animals. So, bone bukog na siya or cartilage nga nag-perform sa anterior extremity sa lower jaw sa mga animals. Next is dentary. Dentary is the thin portion which lies on the lateral surfaces of the middle of the lower jaw. So, ang dentary is the anterior, in another definition, it is the anterior bone of the lower jaw which bears the teeth. In mammals, it forms the whole of the lower jaw. So, ang dentary is anterior bone sa lower jaw na siya nga part, which is nag-bear sa teeth in mammals. Nag-form siya og whole lower jaw. Next is angulosplenial. Angulosplenial is the stout component of the lower jaw, inner and posterior to the preceding parts. So, in other definition, it is relating to both the angular and the splenial. So, mauna siya ang anterior angulosplenial. So, letter D is hyoid cartilage. So, in function or meaning of the angulosplenial is it is relating to or being a thin membrane bone on the inner side of the mandible of many vertebrates below mammals that resembles a splint and is usually in close relation with the dentary. Next is hyoid cartilage. So, cartilage or hyoid cartilage constitutes the visceral apparatus of the it is a thin cartilaginous plate supporting the floor of the mouth identify. So, what is hyoid cartilage? So, hyoid cartilage is bone, small U-shape, solitary bone, situated in the midline of the neck, anteriorly and the base of the mandible and posteriorly of the fourth cervical vertebra. Its anatomical position is just superior to the thyroid cartilage. So, ang hyoid cartilage is U-shaped bone na siya, nga solitary bone. Na siya makita sa midline sa atoang liog. Next is anterior cornua. Anterior cornua is the two long, slender anterior process arising from the anterolateral borders to the hyoid. So, in other term, anterior cornua is the transparent part of the eye that covers the front portion of the eye. So, kani siya ang ga-cover sa atuang atubangan sa mata. It covers the pupil or the opening at the center of the eye. Iris, the colored part of the eye. So, kanina yung color, nga-color sa atong mata is, ang ginatawag niya siya og iris. And anterior chamber, the fluid filled inside of the eye. The cornea's main function is to refract or bend light. So, ang ihading main function sa anterior cornua is nag-refract siya sa bend sa light. Next is alari process. So, alari process is a small lateral expansions from anterior lateral borders of the hyoid. So, in other definition, the Asa vestora is vertebral. Alari process is the typical vertebra is get in posterior cornua, the two short posterior horns behind the alari process. Then anterior process is posterior and medial to the presiding part arising from the middle part of the posterior. So next is the vertebral column. So the vertebral column is, in my research, it is the bone, muscles, tendons, and other tissues that reach from the base of the skull to the tailbone. So ang kanidi ay vertebral column is bukog na siya, muscles, tissues nga nag-reach sa base of the tailbone. The vertebral column encloses the spinal cord and the fluid surrounding the spinal cord, also called backbone, spinal column, and spine. So, muna siya ang vertebral column. Next is the atlas vertebra. So, the atlas vertebra is the first cervical vertebra, commonly called C1. Ang atlas vertebra is muna siya ang first cervical vertebra. It is articulates with the ends of the axis and the occiput, respectively, allowing rotation of the head and flexion, extension, and lateral flexion of the head. So next is the typical vertebra. So what is typical vertebra? So typical vertebra consists of a body and vertebral arc. The arc is formed by the paired pedicles and paired laminae. Arising from the vertebral arc are the transverse spinous superior article and inferior articles process. So the vertebral foramen provides for passage of the spinal cord. So ang vertebra is siya ang ga-provide sa passages or process sa spinal cord. Ang typical vertebra consists of body vertebral. Next is centrum. So centrum is body of the vertebra which replaces the notochord. Shape depends on the vertebrate class. So next is neural arc. So neural arc is bone or cartilage of a vertebra that is situated posterior to a vertebral body. Is formed by the fusion of two pedicles and two laminae. So next is neural spine. A neural is a large, flattish protrusion from the back of an animal, form of a sequence and extended vertebral spinous process and associated in tissue. So mo ni siya ang neuron, kana siya muna siya muna siya ang example niya. Next is transverse process. So the transverse process is a project laterally form the junctions of the lamina and the pedicle on each side of the vertebrae. The transverse process serves as a point of attachment for muscles that help move the vertebrae as well as ligaments that stabilize the vertebral column. Next is Prezygapophysis is a thick out of an end of a vertebra to make the backbone more stable. The superior process of prezygapophysis is project upward from a lower vertebra. Next is sacral vertebra. So sacral vertebra is the sacrum is a large bone located at the terminal part of the vertebral canal. So next is in another term, sacral vertebra is a large, flat, triangular shaped bone nested between the hip bones and positioned below the last lumbar vertebra. So makita ni ang sacral vertebra sa ato ang hip. Sa ato ang hip nato ni siya makitaan. Next is ang urostyle. So urostyle is a long bone formed from focus vertebrae at the base of the vertebral column in some lower vertebrates, especially frogs and toads. So, ang urostyle is long bone siya nga makitaan sa vertebral column of the frog. Next is the sternum and the pectoral girdle. So, ang another term or what is sternum, it is responsible for providing structural support to your shoulder region on the left and right side of your body. Next is suprascapula frog. So, suprascapula is minimize the impact of the jump by absorbing some of the energy. So, ang suprascapula is siya ang minimize sa pag-ambak-ambak sa mga frog. So, the bones in pectoral girdle of a frog are scapula and dorsal bone. So, next is scapula. So, scapula is a large triangular shaped bone that lies in the upper back. So, scapula is makita nato ni siya sa triangular shaped bone na siya nga makita nato diri sa atoang likod. Next is clavicle. Clavicle is technical term for collarbone. So, clavicle is collar bone na siya. Next is coracoid. So, coracoid is a paired bone which is part of the shoulder. So, ang coracoid is mo ni siya. Kani mo ni ato ang duha ka part sa ato ang duha paired bone nga na sa ato ang abaga. Next is fenestra is small opening or pore commonly used as a term in the biological sciences. So, ang pore is Latin word sa pore is window. And it's used various well to describe a pore in an anatomical structure. Next is epicoracoid. Next is epicoracoid. Epicoracoid is a ventral cartilaginous or bony element of the coracoid in the shoulder girdle of some vertebrates. So, ang epicoracoid is bony ni siya, bukugo ni siya nga element nga nasa shoulder girdle sa mga vertebrates. So, next is sternum. So, sternum is a partially T-shaped vertical bone that forms the anterior portion of the chest wall centrally. So, ang sternum is T-shaped ni siya nga bone. Next is episternum. So, episternum is a bone with the clavicles, especially in mammals. The upper part of the sternum, the anterior part of the sidewall of a thoracic segment. Next is omosternum. Omosternum is the anterior element of the sternum which projects forward from the between clavicles in many batrachanians and is usually tipped with cartilage. Next is mesosternum. So, mesosternum is the middle portion of body or the sternum. Sinani siya sa atoang lawas. Next is siphisternum is the lowest part of the sternum, the siphoocoid process. Nani siya sa pinaka lowest part sa sternum, makitaan ang siphisternum. Next, siphisternum is a small triangular part of the sternum that starts out of cartilage and eventually hardens as a person ages. Next is forelimb. So, forelimb is either of the front limbs of a animal. So, ang forelimbs is limbs na siya sa animals. Next is humerus. Humerus is the largest bone of the upper extremity and defines the human brachium or arm. So, ang humerus is the largest bone of upper extremity. Ang humerus is muna siya ang pinaka-largest nga bone sa ato ang mga tao nga dinini siya sa arm, makitaan. Next is the radio ulna. So, the radio ulna is a single bone in the forelimb of an amphibian. such as frag, that represent fusion of the separate radius and ulna of higher vertebrate forms. So, ang radioulna is four-limb bone sa mga frog. Muna siya. Next is carpals. So, carpals is a bone of the rest that connect the distal aspects of the radial and ulnar bones of the forearm to the bases of the 5 metacarpal bones of the hand. So, ang carpal bones is kaning ato ang kamot. Kaning 5 metacarpal bones sa ato ang kamot. Connect na siya sa distal aspects of the radial and the ulnar bones of the forearm. Next is metacarpals. So, metacarpals is several tubular bones between the rest or carpal. So kaning di ba maana-ana atong kamot. So kaning diri sa may pulso dapit is na dira ang metacarpal. Bones on each of the four-limbed digits in land vertebrates corresponding to the metatarsal bones of the foot. So kung diri na atay pulso sa diri po sa tiil nato napud diri makitaan sab diri ang metacarpal. Next is phalanges. So, phalanges is the 14 bones that are found in the fingers of each hand and also in the toes of each foot. So, ang phalanges is makita nato ni siya sa atoa Japon nga fingers, ato mga kamot. Dayon dito po sa ato ang foot na po dito makitaan ang phalanges. Next is pelvic girdle. So, ang pelvic girdle is a bony ring formed by the left and right hip bones and the sacrum. So, ang pelvic girdle is makita nato diri sa ato ang hip. Sa ato ang dapi-dapi nga bony ring nga makita sa ato ang dapi-dapi. Muna siya ang pelvic girdle. Next is ischium. Ang ischium is a paired bone of the pelvis that forms the lower and back part of the hip bone. So, kani siya is ang ischium is makita nato siya sa likodan nga part sa ato ang hip. Muna siya ang ischium. Next is pubis. Pubis is one of the 3 bones that fuse to form the hip bone. So ang pubis is siya ang nag-form sa ato ang hip. Siya ang rason nga nang na-form ang ato ang hip. Next is hind limb of human. So hind limb are found in the back part of the body. So, ang hind limb is makita nato siya sa ato ang likod sa ato ang diri sa atong buko-buko. Diri nato makita ang hind limb nga handy body or sa limbs are arms, legs in the human body or arm legs in the human body. Basta diri sa atong likod nay bukog diri nato siya makitaan. Next is femur. Femur is the bone of the thigh or upper hind limb articulating at the hip and the knee. So the third segment of the leg in insects and some other arthropods, typically the longest and thickest segment. Next is the tibia fibula. So tibia fibula is the 2 long bones in the lower leg. So ang tibia fibula is makita nato ni siya sa ato ang lower leg. Diri nato na makita ang tibia fibula. They connect the neck and ankle. Naka-connect ang tibia fibula sa ato ang liog o sa ato ang ankle. But they are separate bones, pero magkalalahi sila nga mga bukog. The tibia is the 5th bone, the larger of the 2 bones in the lower leg. The top of the tibia connect to make knee joint and the bottom connects to the ankle joint. Next is the tarsus bone. So the tarsus bone is a cluster of 7 articulating bones in each foot, situated between the lower end of the tibia and the fibula of the lower leg and the metatarsus. It is made up of the midfoot, cuboid, medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiform and navicular. So the next is calcaneum. So calcaneum is the large bone forming the heel. So siya ang ga-form sa atong heel. It articulates with the cuboid bone of the foot and the talus bone of the ankle. And the Achilles tendon or tendocalcaneus is attached to it. So next is astragalus bone. So, astragalus bone is a small bone in your ankle. So, kini diri sa atong tiil, diri na to makit-an ang astragalus bone. It's sometimes called the astragalus bone. The talus is the second biggest bone in the back of your foot. Muna siya pinakadako nga bukog diri sa ato ang back sa ato ang tiil. So next is metatarsal bone. So metatarsal bone are the bones of the forefoot that connect the distal aspect of the cuneiform. So kaning metatarsal bone is kuha ni siya kaning diri dapit sa ato ang mga kulamoy sa ato ang tiil. Next is phalanges is the 14 bones that are found in the finger of each hand and also in the toes of each foot. So next is calcar bone. So the calcar bone is a spore of thickened bone that lies deep to the lesser trochanter but posterior to the neutral axis of the femoral neck. So next is the human skeleton. So the human skeleton view the model of the endoskeleton of man. Observe the common basic pattern with that of the toad. Study and compare the human skeleton. What is human skeleton? So human skeleton is the framework of bones and cartilage. Of bones and cartilage that supports and protect the soft tissues and the internal organs of the body. So ang human skeleton is usasab siya nga ga-support sa atuang internal organ sa atuang panglawas. So the human skeleton the support and shape the body and protects delicate internal organs such as the brain, heart, and lungs. So, usa sa iyang gisupport is ang atuang utok, ang atuang heart, ug ang atuang lungs. Bones contain most of our body calcium supply. The body is constantly building up and breaking down the bone tissue as required. So, that's all for exercise number 8. Thank you.